As an essential part of Mai Ling Speaks, we attempt to connect active voices around the world that are dealing with the anti-Asian ramifications of this pandemic. So today we are really happy to have Kimiko, Sina, and Jeun join us from Korientation. Korientation is a post-migrant self-organized group and a cultural and educational network of Asian Germans. Korientation pursues the goal of creating presence and expression to the diverse realities of Asian Germans, their life and day-to-day experiences.
An essential part of their work is to strengthen their cultural and political self-representation in order to influence the development of a diverse German society. They organize various activities and projects where racist clichés and exclusionary practices are questioned and where the view of the different reality of people can be expanded.
So my name is Jian, and I'm actually one of the founding members of Korientation. And actually, Korientation started as a very loose group of Korean Germans in 2007. We already pursued this aim of making our voices heard because Asian or Korean German voices were actually not really existent. And we started to publish little articles and interviews and whatever about our everyday lives and issues and topics on a blog. And in 2008, we registered as a nonprofit association to organize a big migration project to kind of research our own migration history or histories as a Korean, like second generation Koreans in Germany. And also to be able to tell a story from our own perspective, not being talked about only in German society. And this was actually the starting point for Korientation, because when we started organizing this project, we met a lot of interesting people also from other communities who are very interested in sharing their stories. And we discovered that this kind of like ethnic boundary, like being and also describing ourselves as Korean German was too limiting for us. So we also discovered that many experiences that we shared with other people were not based on like these ethnic, national, whatever experiences, but more on experience of being marginalized or having experience like racism and whatever in a German society. So quite quickly we realized that we expanded our association from being a Korean German association to an Asian German association. And we started to change this and also change the registration description for our nonprofit association. And yeah, since 2008, we are doing different kinds of work, especially at the intersection of culture, media, and academic research.
Thank you again for your invitation for this interview. My name is Kimiko. I actually entered Korientation through the Asian Film Festival Berlin when they decided to open it up and not only relate to Korean German perspectives. For me, that was the first organization I could find in Germany, which was actually working topic related and project based. My background is I have a German Spanish mom and a Japanese father, and so far I couldn't find a platform where I could work because most of the organizations were working heritage based or relating to the countries of their parents. So I think that is special about Korientation, that we work under the term Asian Germans as second generation and choose this term not based on geographical relations, but on rather a political statement of solidarity and resistance, one might say. We've been working with institutions and also small initiatives coming from the community. For example, we've been creating a film series with a museum in Hamburg. We had a big exhibition, as Gian mentioned, with the Neue Gesellschaft für Bildende Kunst. That was the first project in 2008. In the last 2 years, we had a format called Voicemail, which was an open stage where people could bring in music, spoken words, stand-up comedy to represent themselves in a cultural spectrum. And as I mentioned before, one of our longest ongoing projects is the Asian Film Festival Berlin, where we show films from Asia and from the Asian diaspora in Europe and the US, and where we always try to find topics related to gender, migration, resistance, which actually have a transnational connection, so to bring together diasporic voices or perspectives from different countries. First, to your question, we understand art as politics, and we just understand art as a medium to talk about politics in a how you could say that, in a detail-oriented and creative way. I don't see a division, and yes, I would say Asian Germans are marginalized in the cultural sector, but currently there is a network which is nationwide with, for example, Dante in Hamburg, and in Berlin we also have the Asian Film Network Berlin. So we are already different initiatives working together and trying to share resources, access to institutions, and so on. So I would say there's really, and then I could say there's an increase of visibility, especially in the last 2 years.
I will try to answer to your question. My name is Zina, and maybe we can talk a little bit about my personal experience with this whole social distancing, digitalization thing. So what I experienced actually is that there is, so maybe first, Korientation is an organization that is based in Berlin. So most of our activities, our face-to-face, in-person activities, they take place in Berlin. And what I experienced right now is, of course, also related to this whole corona racism context, but I see that there's much more connection right now on a German-wide level, and also transnationally, I think. For example, we had a very spontaneous video conference organized by a migrant anti-fascist initiative, which was actually aimed at having an exchange for people of Asian descent and their experiences with racism. And then there were many people from very different regions of Germany. So we also had somebody who was from, for example, Hanover, and me as well. I was actually born close to Hanover, and then I realized that, okay, I was always looking for somebody like another Asian person in my surrounding when I went to school, and then I just realized, okay, cool, there's another person from Hanover. And I think this is already something which is really cool right now. On the one hand, I think you have other means of access actually to get together, to organize, which are maybe a little bit more accessible than just meeting face to face. And of course, this could also have happened before. I mean, these are means that we already use for other opportunities or other reasons, but not like, I mean, for organizing. I think we didn't do this that much as we do now. So this is something that I think is actually very good. On the other hand, also you have to consider that not everybody has the same access to these kind of digital means or tools as well. I mean, it really depends on if you have an access to, I mean, a smartphone or a laptop or something, or a good internet connection. So yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, on the one hand it's good, on the other hand it can also reinforce some inequalities, I guess, but this is something that I also actually realized, because we now are more active on social media, especially on Instagram. And I can see that this also has a very big effect. You can just like share pictures, share a statement, and then it's shared between many people. And you can also, like this, show other Asians, okay, who are maybe not in the same area, who live yeah, outside of those big cities like Berlin or Hamburg or whatever. You can show them, okay, we stand up and we speak up against this form of racism that is happening right now, and you're not alone. And you can also join and you can contact us. And I think that's happening right now. And also, I think resource-wise for us is really helpful right now to have all those different organizations digitalizing their activities, like trainings or other resources. So, for example, what I just discovered is kind of a lot of US-based organizations that are working in the social justice sector and who provide online intervention trainings for people who witness racist harassment against Asian people. So this is, for example, an organization that's called Holla Back. And there's another organization which is called Trainings for Change, and they offer facilitating trainings, like online facilitating trainings that are aimed at people who work in social justice. And I took part in one of those webinars, and it was funny because I just, like, we went to a small breakout room, and then I just talked to a lady from the US who is a union activist. So I think even though we don't meet in person, this was a very nice encounter that I had. And also right now is in May is Asian Pacific Heritage Month, and I think also there are a lot of documentaries, films, and other resources are put online right now, and that is something that we can also use for our work. So we can use this, we can like share it, make it more visible, and as I said, I think all those things existed before, but now as we are kind of forced to use them, we see, okay, it's possible. And what I hope what will happen is that all these connections and all these relations can continue to be sustainable, and also yeah, go on in the future, and that we stay in touch, and yeah, make this connections more sustainable.
Thank you so much for the answer. You talk about, yeah, this this digitalization actually have helped us, even it exists already all the time, but now it is extremely in use because of the situation. But you also mentioned that this is not for everyone, because also you need to have this condition. You must have a laptop, you have access to internet, or you have a smartphone. And but racism can be confront everyone. So are you worrying about a little bit also, because it is also a kind of privilege to have this digitalized resource, right?
I mean, I think maybe not worrying, but I think that's something that we have to consider all the time, to have it in our head and to reflect on it, because I mean, also our project and our work is actually trying to be done from an intersectional perspective. So we try to also include other forms of discrimination, like consider other forms of discriminations apart from race-based. And yeah, I mean, in this matter, I think it's really important to think about that and to try to find means on how to, yeah, to maybe try to find ways to also approach people who are normally not in our bubble. But I think that's also something that we have to think about. I think that's something that we didn't think to the end yet, or haven't thought to the end yet. And I don't know, maybe Kimiko or Jin also have something to add to this.
Something I forgot to mention before, which is really important. Korientation has been working based on voluntary work for about 10 years. And now we finally have a government supported project called MEGA, Media Empowerment for German Asians. And basically that is a project offering workshops for young people to learn how to make their podcast, a short film, write an article to represent themselves in the German media. So that is a very concrete project, also related to the idea of self-representation. And of course, it's also a way to enable people more to fight back in the internet and in social media, and be also more taken more serious if you have a professional format. But of course, at the same time, yeah, we're also thinking about the first generation who might not use Zoom and so on. So we see it also as a generation related issue, that different people use different medium to connect. But I think just now in our everyday work, for example, we often get emails from older people. Just yesterday, we got one from a Chinese doctor from a different city, and then they sent us a mobile phone number. So sometimes we also just say, of course, we can use the phone if someone wants to reach us. So as much as we can, we also try to react to the needs of different generations and different mediums of communication.
Perhaps I can also add something, and I think because your question was also kind of targeting our like this very special period where we are limited to digital media and online communication a lot, or yeah, telephones or whatever. And I think well, there are barriers that we cannot really overcome, I think, in this regard, because I think the whole society is struggling with that, right? But on the other hand, also, I think Korientation does have a certain target group, and we also have a very specific focus. But there are also a lot of other new organizations or newer organizations who are also doing very terrific work in areas that we cannot really cover. So I think there's a growing landscape of Asian German or Asian diasporic groups and organizations and activists, and like in these times, I think there's a very lively so there are new movements, and there are new new solidarities are showing, and it is becoming more visible. And also, I think through these new channels that Sina mentioned, for example, social media, we can also reach or other people that have not really known about different groups can reach us, or other groups or individual people, and connect. I think this is quite important. like for us, this was actually not a very big question because we are based in Germany, and we also consider ourselves like most of our members, or most also and also our team, because we're all second generation, we consider ourselves to be German. So since Germany is the society that we live in, we are surrounded by German media, which influences and shapes the discourse that makes us actually like targets for racist incidents. And this is also something, so also German media is the media that is within our scope to influence, right? So for us, it was kind of a no-brainer. We really didn't think so much about it. It was a very organic process. So we had this inspiration. We saw other documentations and archival work by other organizations. They were collecting the voices of people who had experienced racial harassment in these times, and we thought we would kind of complement this archival work by collecting the media coverage. And since we are also working at this intersection, I thought it would make sense. And for sure, our collection cannot be exhaustive, right? We only show examples of racist media coverage, and we try to focus on big mainstream media outlets. So you can just see what, for example, Spiegel, which is one of the most important weekly magazines and monthly magazines in Germany, with a very big reach, or outside, or like public broadcasters like ARD and ZDF. You can see how normal certain racist comments or images, or the combination of text and image is. And this is why we thought it makes sense to collect and focus on the German media. Did it answer your question?
Yes, very much. Actually, it's extremely interesting because we also started doing some archival work on our own, and this also happened quite spontaneously, just because we've been encountering from the start all kinds of reports or language, or also images that are being sent out in major news outlets, media outlets in Austria. And it really happened quite spontaneously for us to collect them, and also to contact certain outlets to protest and let them know, okay, and say, okay, this is not acceptable, or this type of language or this type of image is actually extremely racist.
I think we see this whole collection rather as a process and not as a, we don't have an aim that we're working for. We started this, as Jin said before, very organically, because it was kind of a reaction to the first media coverages that happened in the beginning of February. I think that's when we started to think about this, thought about observing how media is responding to this whole topic. And then we realized that we have to intervene somehow. So that's when we wrote a press release on this topic, in order to show that language and framing is connected to action, and that it influences how people are perceived also in Germany, especially Asian people in this context of the coronavirus. And then and then we started, and then we realized, okay, this is not, it's not stopping, actually, it's going on. Like media, we saw that there are the way that lots of media outlets reported on this topic showed the same patterns. They used Asian persons as images for their reports and their articles, even though they were sometimes even not, how I say, connected or related to each other. And then we just kept going on and thought, okay, we have to kind of collect these reports to show that this is not, these are not isolated incidents, that these are not singular reports, but that there is it's more structural and systemic thing. And then yeah, we kind of also used this, since we got a lot of interview requests as well in this whole process of rising racism against Asian people in Germany. And we also thought that, okay, that's actually not the work we're doing. I mean, it's part of the work we're doing, but we are also working on this project that Kimiko and Jian already talked about, this empowerment work, which is very, very important for us. So we kind of realized that it's the work we do, the anti-racist work and the empowerment work is not really balanced, and then we have to find means to also save some resources for us. So we thought, okay, when we have this documentation of these media reports, then also the media outlets can do a bit of, like, they don't have to do that much research, they can just look at our page and then they have the evidence that this is happening. And it's also kind of turning a bit the gaze, because mostly the interview requests that we get, they focus on how Asian people or people of Asian descent experience racism right now. It's more like this victim perspective. And I think what we are doing with this collection is also to shift the focus, and also to mirror that what we are looking at is actually how, like, the white perspective or the mainstream perspective is regarding at us. So it's kind of mirroring the gaze, or mirroring the perspective. And I think this is also something that we find very important, because this is more like an resistant or empowering perspective for us.
Yeah, Kimiko, please.
No, I just wanted to add that just before the shutdown, the three of us attended a conference organized by an organization called Neue Deutsche Organisation, NDO. It's a network of so-called new German organizations or post-migrant organizations, and it was just briefly after the shooting in Hanau happened. I think you heard about it, right?
I think so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And one Turkish-German comedian, she was doing the moderation. Her artist name is Jilet Aisha. You can also find her on YouTube and so on. Mm-hmm. And there were lots of panels where also politicians were sitting from the government, because there was some funding issues, so they had to be there. And they always asked, so how do you feel as a member of the victim group? And then she was also always turning the gaze around saying, so, but how do you feel as a member of the group who is perpetrating the violence? So it's really an important thing to enforce this change of gaze or perspective, we think.
I completely agree. And I think also what is sort of like a red thread throughout all of your multifarious projects, I find, is this divergence away from, the structural racism in which most of the media outlets, or most of the portrayals of Asians in Germany is actually by, predominantly white society. And that what you do is that you diverge that discourse away from the canon, but towards, marginalized cultural spheres and voices through means of empowerment, enabling young people to, to basically get onto the tools to have their voices out, or through cultural activities and events. And I find that extremely fascinating and motivating for us also as an artist collective.
I think that we also see not only so we also see a lot of movements and also a lot of more collective, like solidaric work happening right now, also in the arts world. So, and not only like Asian Germans, but more like POC or BIPOC groups are actually coming together, like creative, they're more creative, interdisciplinary groups emerging. And I think that their voices are emerging right now also. I mean, it started before, and there are also institutions in Berlin, for example. A more famous example might be like the Gorki, the theater that has this post-migrant perspective and also staged post-migrant productions. And also, like, for example, Ballhaus Nanienstraße, which also has a very strong political BIPOC perspective, I think. Kimiko, please, perhaps you can like add on to my.
I don't know, as Jian mentioned, the Gorki Theater is run by Charmin Langhoff. She's the founder of the so-called post-migrant theater. So she's really setting the agenda, and Ballhaus Nanienstraße is famous for Black German perspectives. We also did our last film festival there. So we could say in Berlin, we are lucky with two institutions who have directors who set a certain agenda and invite people. And of course, there's also a struggling over resources. I mean, we shouldn't say everything is perfect. But I think for me and Sonju Che, who actually founded the Asian Film Festival Berlin, our move was just to say, we run our own film festival so we can set our own agendas and start our own tiny institution so we can decide on programs, who to invite, how to try to share resources, money in a fair way. Because I also see the point, a lot of programs where maybe young curators are invited and then the ideas are used maybe by white directors or whatever. I also see that, see it happening. So I think the best idea is really to start your own festivals, to learn how to get the resources. Of course, that's also resource sharing, to try to support younger people who maybe never wrote an application to government programs, and build strong networks and inform each other about funding programs coming up. That's what we do right now, also with friends and people in the arts world from Hamburg and some other places. And currently we also try to open up our network, also include more people from Eastern Germany, because they're so far maybe less included in networks from Leipzig, Dresden, or also smaller towns. So that is a new thing which we try to support. And Korientation also sees itself as a platform for resource sharing, meaning helping also younger people to apply for funding and so on.
Yes, or even include project ideas of younger people or other people who don't have the means to apply for funding into our project applications. So in order then afterwards we can collaborate together in our projects, which are their projects as well, you know.
But I also wanted to add that like, if you are not in that position that you can just be independent from existing institutions, right? I heard of some initiatives and some campaigns where, for example, performing artists, they try to include a anti-racist clause into their contracts. So there was there's this kind of movement. I didn't really follow it up, but there were some people that I know involved. I thought it was super interesting. So they contacted a lawyer. I think she's also POC, and she drafted this clause and also negotiated, I think, with different institutions. And they started like a petition and whatever, or like this open letter, and asked for support from different like individuals, but also collectives and organizations. And I think what Kimiko said, I also think this is super important for our work, is to build strong networks, to support each other, and to show solidarity. Yeah, I think this is I think one of the most important things also in our work.
Thank you very much, because there are so many tips and also information about either institution and an association.
Thank you very much for this interview, and I hope we stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.